So we want to go now a little bit more into depth of the different landscapes for AI in Canada and Germany. And Silko, we talked before, and I had seen the presentation of Gilles before, and so I knew it would be good to start with you, because what the DFKI does is very much in comparison and probably in some aspects different to what we just heard. So could you explain us, the DFKI being one of the most important research centers for AI, what do you do and how do you create the landscape for AI in Germany and worldwide?
Yeah, thank you very much. So the DFKI, in the English title is the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence. It is existing in Germany for since 30 years right now. So we have locations that are existing for 30 years. I'm coming from a location that is, from Bremen. We are a big robotics institute, research department of DFKI. And DFKI is, the concept of DFKI is to be as a, let's say, a bridge between the university research and to act as a transfer institute for applied research and also enable the transfer into the industry. And the idea is to have the universities and the federal states and the industry in one, let's say, construct where you have industrial shareholders. We have a big shareholder board with Airbus, Volkswagen, even Google is participating in that board, and many more. And the idea is then to, so I would say, the basic idea is that you have research departments. Each research department is governed by a university professor. So he or she is associated with the university on site. So we always have this fundamental basic research also incorporated in our concept. And then we have different project lines where we try to achieve the transfer from the fundamental research to the applied research. So starting with programs from the federal states, from the government, also from the European Union. We are also very much involved in the European Union networks and initiatives. And then more and more to talk to industrial partners and try to understand their problems and also transfer then the technology into the industrial application. And this kind of transfer is always very individual because, you have different problems, and also some industrial partners want to have a more strategic partnership with DFKI, and others would like to only have one particular technology. And I think one difference, or at least I perceive this as a difference to what I just heard, is that we always try to so we very much rely on public research right now. It's about 80–90% that is funded by European or national programs. So when we talk to the industry, we always try to, of course, our idea is to transfer the knowledge and also to transfer the intellectual property. But on the other hand, we also try to talk to the industry to give us the freedom so that we can, for example, publish some of the work in open source software. And I have made the experience that the industry, as soon as they understand that the research that needs to be beyond what is in the market right now, that the industry is also willing to do so that we can really create a partnership between the industry and the research.
And now that we understood better how the DFKI works, what is your personal interest? What is your personal project right now within this huge context of AI and DFK?
Yeah, so I mean, we have really, so alone in the institute that we are having right now is we're having about 40 projects alone in our institute. So there are many things. I think for the collaboration with Canada or topics which we see very important also with Canada is the space in the space domain. So we had a couple of cooperations with Canada for space robotics and also underwater robotics, so inspection of underwater robots. It's a very hot topic right now, but many more. I mean, the German AI strategy is focusing a lot also on, I would call it more personalized AI, so that you have mechanisms for data protection and that you have control over your data. And I think this is something that is also very important for us in the future, because we have, it's a very powerful technology, and I think the European and maybe also the Canadian approach is different from the Chinese or the US American approach. So I think, and it's very important to have that.
Okay, we come back to you later. So, and I'm going to turn over now to our panelists in Montreal. And Charles, I would like to start with you. First of all, thank you very much to you and McCarthy that you host for the third time the German-Canadian concourse. I think we were twice in Montreal, once in Toronto. So thank you very much for that. And you have on your website that slogan, innovative solution managing risks. And you're mainly a law firm. And when the general public thinks about AI, many people are afraid of risks, especially if we talk about the ethics. So I wanted to know from you, how do you consult with McCarthy? What do you do about AI and the legal and probably ethical aspects about that?
Thank you very much. So delighted to host everyone here in Montreal today. It's wonderful to see so many of you turn out. I'll answer in a sense, I'm wearing two hats today. When we discussed in advance what would be of most interest to those attending, there were two elements about my interactions with AI and applications of AI that seem to be of interest. One is I had the technology law group, or co-lead the technology law group at McCarthy's. And a couple of years, it's sort of the return of the circle or whatever. A few years ago, we went and we visited with Professor Savard at Vado Labs at the University of Montreal. And it was interesting to see, I mean, it was, for me, sort of a familiar environment, going back to the university setting, professors' offices, and so on. So I'm delighted to see that this afternoon, the professors getting out of the university, they're going to be the coolest people in the room. I think that's a general phenomenon. The nerds have become the coolest people in the entire city. Probably the best paid people in the entire city as well, to be honest, but we'll be with them in their offices this afternoon. And so from the first hat as a lawyer, a couple of years ago, we were talking about AI and the impact that it could have on industry. Right now, every single transaction that I'm working on has an AI component. Part of that is just rebranding, because there was an intelligent component. There was big data had already been on the radar for a number of years, and so let's call it AI instead, and then we'll perhaps get some more funding. But every single transaction that I'm working on right now has an AI component. And every single transaction, therefore, has elements that require, some deep thinking and some new thinking. There's issues around data ownership. There's issues around the IP rights. Who owns not only the IP that's being contributed, but the IP that is developed. The data, the contributions that are being provided, everyone wants to be collaborative, but There's always risk and tension around what each party brings to the table and what you're willing to reveal and how much you're willing to contribute. The data readiness, is the data that you're bringing to the table actually valuable, or is it a mess? And so what do you have to do in order to ready that data? What do you have to do in order to ensure that the data, for instance, is anonymized or depersonalized or put in a form that is going to be respectful of the privacy rights of individuals? I'm working with a project, a retail innovation foundry that is looking at, for instance, consumer behavior in shopping malls and that sort of thing, trying to keep up with, very hard to do, frankly, but keep up with the Amazons of this world in terms of getting a better understanding of actual consumer behavior. Well, it's important to figure out what people want, but you have to do it in a privacy responsible way. So how can we work with technologies that will anonymize the video captured data at source? How will we make sure that the data that is collected can be processed, but doesn't necessarily have to be maintained in a personalized format in permanent storage? Can we process it while it's still ephemeral? So I'm giving a few examples, but on the one hat that I'm wearing, if you will, relates to helping our clients negotiate some pretty fundamental issues in their business transactions. The second hat that I wear is that I'm currently the vice president of the International Technology Lawyers Association. In Boston at the annual conference in May, I'll become the president. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to accomplish during the sort of presidential year, I wanted to make sure I had a project that would be of real and lasting value to the community. And iTech Law has 1,000 members from 60 countries around the world. Am I too far away? Okay, sorry. I should start again. I'll just say, my name is Charles Morgan. So iTech Law has lawyers and members from 60 countries around the world. I launched a project last year to write a white paper that will be published at the iTech Law conference in Boston in May, to establish a legal policy framework for ethical AI. And one of the issues, one of the things that I found of interest was that in the AI sphere, and this is frankly fairly rare, industry players are coming forth and saying, we need some guideposts. These are big issues. The possibility for innovation and creating new value is enormous, but the issues that we are wrestling with here are significant. And they're issues that can't just be addressed on an ad hoc basis. They are issues of international importance. And so we have a team of lawyers from over 20 countries around the world. There's some German members to talk about the German-Canadian collaboration. We have one of the lawyers from Munich and another lawyer from Hamburg. But from over 20 countries around the world, we have members who are from industry, Google DeepMind, Microsoft, Facebook, IBM, ABB. We have members of our team who are from academia, MIT, Oxford, Berkeley, an Australian university in Melbourne, Brazilian university. And there's an increasing number of frameworks and concepts that have been that are coming to the fore in the sphere of AI research and policy development, if you will. What we're trying to do is take some of that thinking one or two steps further. Hopefully, we want to produce something of lasting value and that is actually actionable as opposed to just food for thought. And so we've developed 10 principles, or we are developing. I mean, we didn't make them up, but we've sort of consolidated research and tried to take it as I say, a couple of steps further around accountability, around open data and fair competition, because there are certain companies, as you know, who have so much data that they can act potentially in a monopolistic manner. Around transparency and explainability, and I think that was a topic of research that we may hear a lot more about. Around fairness and non-discrimination, because some of the data sets, if you're just analyzing the raw data, you may be accentuating a bias that may exist in that data already. Around privacy, cybersecurity, and around social environmental benefit and worker empowerment. Anyway, there are 10 principles, and it's been a very exciting project to work on. But the level of engagement, the level of dynamism, the level of interest, and the level of import. I think everybody understands that this is an exciting sphere, but it's also one that comes with a lot of responsibility. And so how can we make technology work for us instead of feeling like, how can we remain agents instead of sort of just submitting to where technology is taking us? So I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question. Do you think there's like an international really common ground for data protection when you talk to your colleagues, or do we get very quickly into the whole value set? And, you know, I would say the feeling about data in Germany, Canada is a different one to the US and definitely to China. Do you think
Yes.
we have to first find an agreement there, or is this even possible?
It's interesting. There's been a very significant evolution in the thinking around data protection. Obviously, Europe is a leader in this sphere, and for a long time, I think there was, quite a dramatic difference between the U.S. paradigm, the European paradigm, and say the Chinese paradigm. In the U.S., essentially, the view was it's just transactional value. There's a basic bargain. I'll give you free services if you give me your personal information. The only rule was say what you do and do what you say. But essentially, so long as people were truthful about how they collected personal information, they could collect any amount of personal information and do with it whatever they wanted, basically, especially if it made somebody some money. Europe has had, for a whole bunch of historical reasons, among others, a much more interventionist approach to data protection. It's something that resonates very, very powerfully. And the Canadian paradigm, frankly, is much closer to the European paradigm. Back in the early 2000s, we adopted in Canada a comprehensive general framework that applied to all sectors. It's not a sector-specific framework that was designed to meet the same essential principles, data protection principles, fair information principles that existed under the European directive, so as to be able to ensure the free flow of data from Europe to Canada. We made that choice. And we'll probably have to adjust our framework in Canada going forward in order to ensure that we maintain our adequacy status to ensure that data does continue to flow freely from the EU to Canada and elsewhere. And of course, China has a very different approach. And I think I was speaking at a conference in Hong Kong last year. And I think the general view is that, well, of course the state is going to know everything about you. That's sort of just a given. And by the way, if you buy an electric vehicle, all of the data points of that vehicle are there's a direct feed to the Chinese government, and that's part of the bargain too. It's just understood. If you want that benefit, your data will be known, and all the metrics about what you're doing and where you're going will be known. But when I say there's a shift, I would say it's interesting to see that as a result of Cambridge Analytica and any number of other events, I think there is starting to be a more of a common ground that we're finding, and perhaps the elements of consensus. GDPR has extraterritorial application, and so in Canada and the United States, as lawyers, there's a lot of paper flowing around. We're signing data protection agreements all over the place, and everybody is coming to me. All of our clients, it's been good business for me. All of our clients are coming to say, does GDPR apply to me? And if so, how do I have to change not only, my privacy policy, but my actual practices, and how do I, in a supply chain context, what sorts of agreements do I have to put in place with my business partners? And we see that even in California, that they've just adopted the California Consumer Privacy Act that will come in place in 2020. India has just adopted a data protection law that has just come into force, very similar with sort of GDPR plus standards in a country that previously had no privacy laws. So I would say that there is a trend to a much greater awareness of privacy issues, concern about privacy issues, and to a certain extent, this is an overgeneralization, the European standards have become a de facto worldwide standard. That's not an entirely true statement, but it's becoming more of a true statement.
Thank you. All right, we will turn now more to the startup scene, and so can you wait? You wanted to comment on the data thing quickly?
I wanted to make a very quick comment to what you just said. So I think that the data protection issue, that is an issue that now we are aware of that, and it is something that came up with the digitalization. So collecting data, and we see now from China, from the Chinese approach, and also from the US-American approach, which are different, but they all have this data collection approach, that it's very important to deal with that. And I just wanted to make the comment that I think now that we talk about artificial intelligence, which is operating on that data and maybe also in the future will operate our cars, that there is another issue coming up, and this is the issue of really making AI somehow transparent. And I think that is something that it's somehow related to the data protection, but it's also, we now have algorithms that come into play that will make decisions, and I'm convinced they will, in most situations, make the right decisions, but in some cases they will fail, and we need to have mechanisms to question them. And this is a really important issue that is coming up, I think.
Yeah, that topic will definitely come up in our second part of the conference when we talk about mobility. Yeah. And Andreas, before we turn to you, I would like to stay in Montreal. And Jogral, hi. You are from Next AI, which is part of Next Canada, and you're supporting startups in Montreal and Toronto. And first of all, I'm working a lot with startups, and the base is not only of artificial intelligence, but for so many companies in general. Why did you create your own entity for artificial intelligence startups? And what do you do there, and who can apply to become one of your, how do you call them, fellows?
Yeah, so Next AI is a program from Next Canada. It's been existing already in Toronto for the last 3 years. So here it's our first year in Montreal. So it's a 6 months. Well, we actually have a 6 months a program that we give to our startups. So what we do is that we actually help participants create their own team. So we have a platform where we put all our participants, and they're actually able to create their own team. So what we do, we have a tech stream and a business stream. So on on our platform, they are able to meet and then create their own team. So we have an agreement with HEC, which is great. We understand now why HEC is one of the top universities, because they were actually able to push us, and now we're supposed to start next week, and we have 26 ventures. We have 54 participants, and we have mentors. We have teachers like AJ, like Professor Benjo, and also Joel Pinault, and they will be able to mentor all our startups. And what we provide also is a co-working space, and we provide funding for startups. So that's the best thing that we actually offer right now. And what I also see is that one of the best things, and why I actually decided to join an XAI, I believe that in order to be good, that we learn from our own errors. And what I saw that NextAI did is that they learn from the past errors of others, and that they actually want to be great, because what they're trying to do is through diversity, or through gender diversity, or to cultural diversity, they're recruiting the best talent, and they also want to develop the talent that we're recruiting internationally. So that's very good. And after our 6 months program, what we have also is that the teams that don't succeed, they get partnered, let's say, to or fast track to CDL, and also we could be a recruiting tool to Evado or Skill through our participants. And we're international also, so we have participants coming from outside Montreal to join our program.
And where would you get your money mainly from? Like all these accelerators and startups, you need investors and a kind of payment for your general work. How does your funding look like?
Oh, well, we have a great partnership. It's a partnership between. It's a government partnership and a private partnership. So we actually receive funding, and then afterwards also we present our ventures to personal investors. Like we have demo days, we have ventures of venture preview nights. So after getting a first tranche of funding through the program, our best startups, we make them meet investors, and they're actually able to negotiate directly with them. And by doing so, we also provide support. We provide support through a legal firm that we're actually working with. In terms of incorporation, we were talking about IP also. So we help them with incorporation, IP rights, and they have personal meetings with our firm in order to guide them through the whole legal process.
Thank you. And here in Berlin with me is Andreas from the Unternehmertum in Munich. And I was lucky enough last year to be there with the Japanese startup investors, and it's quite a place where you can grasp the whole AI and the general digital sphere, because your students create prototypes and everything in this institute, but you're responsible there for AI, and you collaborate with partners such as Google and 40 more. on an initiative which is the largest initiative in Europe for applying artificial intelligence. What are you doing there, and why did you found that network? What's the purpose?
Yeah, so actually also wearing two hats. On the one hand, Unternehmertum is the largest innovation center in Europe, 17 years old, with about 50 startups we create and 150 startups at Unternehmertum each year. And interestingly, at the moment, about 60 to 80% of the startups use AI somehow in their products or as part of their development of the products. And on the other hand, we see with all the industry partners we're working with that, and on the industry side, there is much less application of the AI technology. And therefore, we found also Applied AI, which is this initiative where we only focus on the really practical questions of how you as a company can really get started on AI. So it really complements DFKI, complements other universities also, like all the research, because it somehow needs to get into application in the industry. And back again in the Unternehmertum, looking at the startups we have in Germany, we actually really lack of really large startups. So if you look at this internationally, there is no single startup in Germany which is really large worldwide. And if we see that AI is really transforming our business, it's the next technological revolution, that's actually a problem for us. We have the technology, but we want to push for really good, strong, large startups also coming from our country. And that's what we want to support with the Applied AI initiative. And then back on the other side, for the companies, they really struggle with really basic questions around organizational topics. So where is this unit in a company, how this should be designed to really bring AI not only into prototypes but really into productive systems. What's responsible for a CFO in terms of risk management of AI algorithms if you really start working with these? How you get your people, how you train your whole staff to get knowledgeable about AI? What's the software infrastructure you're working with? Because it's like we talked about GDPR, and the problem is that most of the companies building the tools for AI development are small startups which are not GDPR compliant. So how do you work with them as a European company? So what type of tool setting? So really practical questions. And what we thought, and we had this discussion also about the values we think we share something that's diversity, that's a strong industry. So we assume that actually if we share our knowledge, if we learn from each other, we are faster. Because we need to be efficient. We have really strong, large players in the US, which have the power to do everything on their own. We have a Chinese state who really pushes for it. And what we can do in Europe and also I think in Canada is to work together, to collaborate, to learn from each other, to be most efficient. And that's what we actually want to do. And that's one of the core parts. Besides that, we help to bring startups together with the companies if they want to use AI and not do everything on their own. And the third thing is education. So we do lots of trainings for companies, not on the tech part, because there are courses on university and so on, but really what it means for a project manager, what it means for a manager, middle management, upper management, for a board member, for example. What does it mean to have, he needs to have the skills for AI application.
And at Next AI, people from all over the world can apply. I'm quite sure that's similar with Unternehmertum. What would you tell them if an international startup founder comes to you? What would you tell them are the big sort of advantages of the German AI landscape? Why would you say, what's our special approach or special infrastructure helping an AI startup?
Yeah. So I think if people come from international companies or the startups, what we are really good at in Germany is the industrial sector. So what I see a lot at the moment is really bringing AI into production, reinforcement learning for hardware, software, like combinations of self-optimizing controls. These types of things. So if startups really think about how to bring AI into the industry, I think that's our focus. We cannot compete with China on the B2C side. Face recognition, all these types of things far ahead. We simply don't have the data. We cannot share it. We cannot train on them. But on the B2B side, that's a strength we have. And that's what we see as the main focus here in Germany. And so like in Applied AI, there are like these 40 partners, a couple of hundred people in these companies really always working on the AI topics. And I think what really I found as a strength is the openness also they discuss with each other and really help them to learn from their failures, from the mistakes, also from what worked well, to help each other, because at least from our side, there is a clear understanding that we only have a chance in Germany that if we collaborate on a European basis, but also on a worldwide basis, focusing on the values we have and seeking for partnerships, but also sharing the same values. And that's why I'm also happy that we are in discussion with some of the Canadian partners here to build this global alliance on AI based on this understanding of having the same values and sharing information to potentially collaborate really on these topics.
Thank you. Would you like to comment, Charles or Chagral? Otherwise, I would start collecting questions now. And just before you start, Chagral, Vera, could you collect 2 questions? And I'm going to collect 2 questions here. And I'm saying questions, no more pitches. And because we want to get into the coffee break, but I want to allow for some question time.
Okay, perfect. I was just saying for the visa part, because here in Quebec we have a startup visa, but the thing is that with our team in Toronto, it's a lot easier for them to get international participants because there's not the barriers linger here in Montreal, and I know that the government of Quebec is like is already working on it, but it's a little bit harder for us to get international participants because in their startup visa they still ask you to know French, so it's a little bit harder for us to recruit, but they're working on it.
Thank you. And Vera, I'm going to take the first question here. Please introduce yourself and keep it short.
Yeah, my name is Günther Tau from the company TBS. Gilles has mentioned that there's a high demand of expert on data science. What I would like to ask you is, and even to the panelists, are you realizing that nearly 98% of all AI is still machine learning? And when it really comes to, let's say, like Pedro Domingos was saying, master algorithm, we don't need so many data scientists anymore. That's maybe it could be in 5-10 years, we don't only need 10%. And that's a part of transparency we have to introduce, the job market. Well, we have already doing some trial with our algorithm, working just on a plain laptop from Aldi or Lidl, and solving problems which you normally need a workstation and maybe 50 to 100 people. And just the last thing is, the new companies in AI, as well as in Palo Alto, don't have any more 2,000 or 3,000 employees. They have only 100, because the algorithms are so perfect now.
So employment, and I'm sure Aldi and Lidl also made it now to Canada. I know at least they're in the US. One more question here from Germany? No? Okay, so Vera, I would like to collect questions before we go into an answer round. Vera, do you have someone?
Yes, we have a question here. Hi, my name is Michel. I was curious to see one of the big issues was the explainability of data. So I'm curious to see what's the current trend being done in both countries to actually make it easier for becoming more transparent.
And your question goes to who? Which speaker? Sorry, sir. Whoever.
I'm not sure who could respond that. It's more to the panel.
To the panel. Okay.
Actually, it's a big issue, the transparency, the explainability of these deep learning algorithms. And the fact is the way the deep learning is working make it very difficult to explain it, actually. So this is why both in Germany and everywhere in the world, we are working on trying to explain the algorithm, giving an input, why is the output. It's inference algorithm instead of procedural algorithms that we used to use before. So this is simply new. And I think in the next few days, if you want to explain it, I would say 99% of the job will be done by deep learning, machine learning algorithms, and the explanation will be done by another algorithms, giving this input. This is probably the more practical, and for the next few years, that will be the case. It's difficult.
Maybe
Thank
also...
if I could, sorry, if I could just add, transparency and explainability is one of the chapter principles that we're working on the white paper. We have the advantage of having one of the members of the Google DeepMind team that participated in developing the AlphaGo program that defeated the world's greatest Go player in Seoul, Korea a couple of years ago. And as you pointed out, I mean, I think in classical AI, which was sort of largely decision tree based, in theory, you could come up with an explanation. It's logical. If A, then B, it might be fastidious, but you could come up with an explanation. With machine learning that's based on levels and levels of sort of neural networks on probability as opposed to, you know, absolute decision-making process, it becomes much more difficult. In the paper, we have some sort of, you know, discussions around, well, there are approaches around counterfactuals. Anyway, there's a number of approaches that are being discussed in the academic literature around how you can go about explaining how a decision is made. None of the approaches have been sort of, as far as I can tell, nobody's sort of decided that there is one best way to do it. And as you say, it may be that AI will be used to explain AI going forward. But in the interim, I think there will be more focus on transparency in the sense of, at the start, you at least have to be establishing and letting people know that AI is being used, that these are the data sets that we are using in order to make the decision, this is globally the general process that is being adopted in order to develop the decision-making process, so that you won't necessarily provide an explanation for each and every decision that has been produced, but at least you're providing enough information for people to understand what the context is for the AI, the AI decision-making process. And I think the intensity of the obligation to produce an explanation, and a coherent one, will increase on the basis of the importance of the decision itself. If an AI system is being used to say, oh, you like that film, you'll probably like this film, or you like that book, you'll probably like this one. Who cares? I mean, frankly, how they figure that out, I mean, I care a little bit because they probably know more about me than I know about myself. But really it becomes an issue when an AI system is being used, for instance, to determine, you know, whether you get a loan or not, whether you have to, your parole application has been decided, whether your immigration application has been decided favorably or not. And so with the intensity of the consequences of the decision, also I think that has an impact on the intensity of the obligation to provide an acceptable explanation.
Yeah, and especially I think we come back to that when we talk about later about mobility. How does the AI within a car decide which object to hit or not? And how is
it always decides not to hit me. That's the
that's the
number one
best
decision, I think. Yeah, we just program that right in.
Andreas and Circo wanted to comment on what has been said and questioned before.
Yeah, just very quickly to add to this. So I fully agree on your answer. I would add, like, DeepMind is a good example. They use the AlphaGo Zero in the cooling centers of the servers, and for sure they cannot explain how actually the system makes the decisions to get this 40% increase in efficiency. But what they do is to build a process which is stable so that you can use this type of black box system to run in a system that needs to be 100% available. And I think it is also about how you set up the whole process, is that it's an augmentation for humans. They make the decisions still. And they need to get a more or less stable answer from a black box system, and it is a cultural change. There will be systems which are really intransparent in how they do their decisions, and you can maybe interpret them afterwards, maybe 1 day, 2 days later, but definitely not in real time. And therefore, we need to find out how we develop processes that make a black box system as stable as possible in 100% reliable process industries, for example.
Thank you. Circo?
Yeah, just very briefly. So I also agree to what you just said. So I don't want to repeat that. Maybe just to take the thought a bit further. So I think that we are more and more talking about autonomous systems also in the afternoon today. And I think as soon as we have these algorithms that make decisions and we have these deep learning networks, that puts us as humans more and more into a situation that is maybe similar to when we look at our own brain. So we have a very complex network. So from my own vita, I'm a neuroscientist, so I'm used to that kind of view, and that is maybe that is a thought that is important here, that we have really a very, very complex network, and that we have ways to find ways, maybe using further AI to also question this network and try to come up with explainability strategies.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question here in Germany, and Vera, I don't know if you see some hands rising, but we have about 5 minutes, and then we would go into a coffee break for half an hour because we have a little bit spare time from the second part because one of our speakers fell sick, so we're going to use his time for coffee break. And I have one more question here.
Right. So I ran a school for 3 months in Berlin where people make projects that have pretty interesting properties. They have potential for social impact in AI. And I do believe that there is a lot of... we are in a golden age where pre-trained models enable anybody, people from their bedrooms basically, to build things that are really impressive that we could not build 5 years ago, right? My question to the panel is, how informed is the average person in the public in Canada? Because I do understand how informed Europeans on average are, and it's unfortunately not very much. It's mostly fear, what you sense here about AI, but not so much about the incredible potential that we have in our hands. So I would like to know how it is in Canada.
And that question came from Jose Quesada, that's right? All right, okay. Anybody in particular, or just someone from Canada? Okay, thank you.
Well, perhaps I'll try. I actually realized there was a question that was asked first that didn't get a response. So I feel badly for the person who
the employability.
Yes, exactly. So maybe I'll just say 2 minutes on that, so that everyone feels like they've been we're paying attention. So it's very interesting, the question, which in my mind has 2 aspects to it. The first is this rush for data scientists. I was fascinated that the first significant mandate that I got in relation to an AI startup was all about employment law and immigration and how to retain these data scientists, how to structure their payment and salary package in a way that was going to be competitive with Palo Alto, how to bring data scientists in from other countries because there's a labor shortage and we can't keep up with the demand. So the first part of the comment was that I think is very relevant, and certainly I see it, is there is a crush of a need all of a sudden for certain categories of skills, and it's hard to find those skills, and so we are in a very competitive and a globally competitive world right now, and Montreal is doing its best to brand itself, and I mean it's with some basis as being a global hub, and it's incredible to see the data scientists and so on coming from literally around the world to come and work here, and so there has to be a strategy around how to attract and retain talent. But the second part of the comment was, oh, well, that's fantastic. We need 5,000 new data scientists today, but tomorrow a machine will do it anyway, and so they'll all be gone, and so then it'll be something else we're looking for. And it points to a need, a crushing need for an approach to lifelong learning, because the fact of the matter is, whatever jobs we have today, they're going to change tomorrow. And that's already the case for myself, but it's even more the case for my 3 daughters, and for everybody in society. There will always be a need for skilled labor and for bright, creative minds, but in terms of what we actually do on a day-to-day basis, it's going to change. And the only thing constant will be change. And so I think from a policy perspective, the focus on education, focus on lifelong learning, focus on creativity is going to be critical. It sort of provides a lead-in to a response or a partial response to the latter question, the last question, which is, how much is the general public aware of AI, and what is the general level of sophistication of the general public? Never mind the general public. I think 99.9% of the population doesn't really understand what's happening, which is, I think, partly why the academics and industry players who really are up the curve in this space are realizing some of the weight of their responsibility, because they're in situations where they are making choices that are going to have very significant societal impacts. And not everybody's part of that conversation. And I think people have to be a part of that conversation. So I think, again, we have to do more in our education system, in our workplace, to help our young students, our PhD students, our general consumers, and our workers understand what the impacts are, so that people can act more from the perspective of, as I say, true agents in this process, rather than simply consumers or recipients of the impact of this technology.
Thank you. Silko,
I think this has to be underlined and strengthened as much as can be, because I think it's not only about new startups or new economy, it's also about really education and having something like a digital competence. So the people have to really have the competence to use this, and then maybe, hopefully, the fear will also be reduced, because then everybody is used to what is it and understands what is happening.
Yeah, let's hope that our German-Canadian concourse can give a little contribution towards that. And Vera, I don't see you, so I gather no more questions in Montreal. Everybody ready for a coffee break? Right.
We have another question here.
Where?
We have
Okay.
another minute or two.
Yeah? Where are you? Ah, there in the back.
Thank you. Bonjour and good afternoon to colleagues in Berlin. I'm Randy Zadra from the National Research Council of Canada, and I just wanted to pick up on the issue of industrial competitiveness and technology, because I think that's something we really share. I know in Germany there's a great concern about 4.0, industrial automation. We have the same issue in Canada. And therefore, there's a whole bunch of challenges around that issue, and I just wanted to maybe ask the panel, both in Germany and Canada, to elaborate on what you see as some of the challenges around the application of AI 4.0 in an industrial setting, and are there similarities and differences between Canada and Germany in that area?
Okay, short comment from one panelist from Montreal and one panelist from Berlin, and then we all get our coffee infusion.
So maybe if I can start. I think what we see is that there are a couple of use cases in all the different companies which are really like basic chatbots, bit of automation in finance and predictive maintenance and so on. This will not be the USPs of these companies. That's something that will be industry average in all these companies. And then the companies have their specific domain knowledge, which is already their USP, and they need to ask themselves, okay, how can I use the technology, AI, to build the next level of this competence in my specific USP? And that's a core question they have. And I don't see any differences between the two countries. It's just that the experts in their specific fields need to somehow get the understanding about the potential of the technology. And it could be a chemical engineer. That could be someone who worked for 30 years in a specific quality check for a process industry or whatever. Like, these people need to get to understand the potential, and they need to come up with the ideas so that the companies, and I'm talking not about the maybe 1% of the large ones, but the 99% of the medium-sized and smaller ones, that they can actually start using this technology. And our challenge should be how to get this understanding about AI to the people who can come up with the future USPs for our industry. And I think that's a challenge we all share.
Would you like to add something to that?
Perhaps two words. I mean, I think the Scale AI initiative is a very interesting one. The decision to focus on the application of AI to supply chain. I mean, I think this is if we're going to succeed, it has to be a success that's based on collaboration. You know, Canada is a small player, and we just can't compete with the United States. But if we're going to try to compete, then it has to be on the basis of collaboration within the industry verticals. So the challenge that I sort of alluded to earlier is you've got competitors that are collaborating, and how do you share? How do you work in that environment in a way that actually is a win-win for everybody involved? And it involves establishing new business models. You know, again, to refer to the retail innovation foundry that I'm working with. You know, it involves the shopping mall owner, it involves some researchers at a university, it involves 4 or 5 retail merchants, all working together. They would never in the past have worked together, but they're all working together to understand consumer behavior in a privacy-friendly way in order to bring real value to all of those players, plus the consumer. Because they realize that if they don't come together and work collaboratively, you know, Amazon's going to put all the rest of us out of business. I mean, not to say that Amazon is evil, but it's just the example, one of many. So I think it takes new creative business processes there are a whole bunch of legal issues around that, so do call your lawyer. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, the panelists. Thank you, the speakers of that part, drawing a picture of the landscape of AI in Germany and Canada.